Hello my good friends, it's Roger again, Mudfossil University. Today talking about space and the Earth and the magnetic field and all of the things that I have been working on with electricity and ether and magnetism and the effects that I can experimentally show. Now, what are we looking at here? We're looking at the sun and we're looking at the Earth. Now, what is the Earth doing? It's creating a magnetic field. And why? They say the sun is putting out all these particles, which I agree with. They now have finally decided they are particles and that they are in space and we are floating through them and they are ether. I say they're negative particles and they're nothing more than electrons thrown from the sun by extreme excitement. They're the lightest particles and they flow out of here. They interact with, they are negative particles, they interact with our spinning magnetic striped Earth. And you say magnetic striped, what do you mean by that? And I say magnetic striped, that's what I mean by that. In the ocean, you see this, mid-ocean ridges, they show the ocean, these are magnetic stripes. They're literally stripes. Now, what does that mean? If you understand a motor, you understand that a motor is nothing more than stripes of pulsating magnetism spinning inside of a magnetic field similar to our magnetic field created by the electrons that are bombarding our Earth as this magnetic polar stripes spin through it. It's creating a motor effect. Nothing more than that. It's creating a motor effect. So there is a lot of consequences to that. If you say, well, wow, the Earth itself literally is a motor. How would that work? Where would the magnetic lines of flux flow? Well, we know they flow out of the North Pole. Or we could call it, they flow out of the North Pole, but actually we're going to talk about that. Because the North Pole is actually indented 10,000 feet, and the South Pole is actually extended 10,000 feet. This is reported by Admiral Byrd. Now let's see why that would happen. This is actually the situation with our solar system. We are being ripped through the galaxy on one of the arms of the Milky Way, and we are being crushing into this magnetic particles that are ahead of us, which are electrons. And every single thing there is coated with electrons. Every atom is surrounded by electrons. So everything here is negative on its surface, crushing through everything out here that is negative, because all the particles are negative. It creates this motor effect and our magnetic field, and in the same time it crushes our North Pole and rips the South Pole back. Okay, this is a galaxy. Let's assume that this was the galaxy that we were in and we were right here or somewhere. As we are being ripped around in the circle, we know it's being ripped around in a circle. We can see that. There's no real discussion to be had about that. So what does that mean? We're going to be moving forward here, let's say. What does that mean? We're going to sooner or later hit one of these other ridges that has a more dense ether in it. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to create more resistance against our solar system, first of all, and secondly against our magnetic field, heating up our planet and creating literally a stronger magnetic field, or at least more motor noise, let's call it that way. But there is going to be an interaction to our magnetosphere, which right now is, I believe it's around 56,000 degrees, let's say. Now, why is it so hot out there? It's because it's scrubbing through the ether. Not because any other reason. It should be cold out there. It's not. It's scrubbing through the ether. That is creating the magnetic field, the magnetosphere. That heat transfers down to the Earth. Right? I believe that is a major source of the Earth overheating now. And that can be tested. They should know what the temperatures are in the magnetosphere and have they risen. If they are rising, I wouldn't say that that was attributed to carbon, a greenhouse. 56,000 degrees out there. I don't think that's a greenhouse effect. Now, the same thing is happening on the sun. The sun itself is only 6,000 degrees on the surface where you see it all bubbling and boiling and everything like that. But if you go out to where it scrubs through the ether of space, which we saw in that GIF, let's look at it again. By the way, this was a GIF done by 4gifs.com. Now, if this is accurate, and I see no reason to believe it's not accurate, we are being ripped through the arm of the Milky Way, spinning, or all things spin to the right if they're spinning correctly. Venus spins backwards and is a total different situation. No magnetic field, gathering heat into itself like crazy. 900 degrees at the poles. Now, I mean at the equator, and minus 250 at the poles. It's a very strange situation, but I can explain it by this theory of the spin into the particles creates the magnetic field, and it creates Higgs fields, and it creates an anomaly which we saw, and I will show you. Now, what's going on here is this is going to overheat, it's going to create more magnetic anomalies. It's millions of degrees outside in the corona and only 6,000 at the surface. Now, everything spinning in space has a characteristic, and I think there may be some reason to believe that the Earth is hollow. Not only the fact that Robert Byrd claimed it was, and that there other people have claimed it is and have been there, and Robert Byrd says he was there. And he sounds like a very, very credible person to me. And I'm going to show you something that I saw today. Somebody sent me to look into, and I have looked at it before, but I just decided today would be a good day to do it. So let's take a look at that Byrd, just a couple of minutes of it. It's a fabulous video, by the way. Let's just start here, and it's going to talk about what's possible going on down there in Antarctica. I'm not going to claim any of this stuff is true. I'm just going with the facts that if a spinning globe that we are on, the Earth, which is nothing more than a magnetically striped Earth, as you saw in the magnetic stripes in the ocean, spinning through magnetic particles, you're going to have these magnetic interactions, and it is going to create a current through the center of the Earth. And it is going to explain everything that every single thing that Byrd says. Well, except for the people that he talked to. Here it goes.
Troubles with many fatalities, though the event was clearly downplayed in the U.S. Following a military-aided evacuation, the force returned. Their stories immediately became classified as top secret, but inevitable leaks revealed that there were attacks by highly advanced saucer-shaped airships. The Secretary of the Navy, by this time the Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, started to talk. President Truman forced him to resign, and he was soon taken to Bethesda Naval Hospital's psychiatric ward, where he was prevented from seeing or talking to anyone, including his own wife. When this high-ranking man was found dead, of course, it was ruled a suicide. Case closed. Another strange thing is in 1947, following the sudden end of his military expedition, Byrd spoke with a reporter for the Chilean newspaper El Mercurio and told him that he didn't want to frighten anyone unduly, but that it was a bitter reality that in the case of a new war, the continental U.S. would be attacked by flying objects which could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. This is where Byrd's posthumous diary comes in. Though he remained faithfully silent, albeit mysterious, shortly after his death, his son published his diary to reveal a very different account than what the public had been told. It started like this. I must write this diary in secrecy and obscurity. It concerns my Arctic flight on the 19th day of February in the year of 1947. There comes a time when the rationality of men must fade into insignificance, and one must accept the unavailability of the truth. I am not at liberty to disclose the following documentation at this writing. Perhaps it shall never see the light of public scrutiny, but I must do my duty here for all to read one day. Hopefully, the greed and exploitation of certain of mankind can no longer suppress that which is truth.
Still today. Now, I want to make another point. You know, it's not unreasonable to believe that they did tell him to shut up, and he had to shut up, because they've told it to everybody else. We've heard this over and over and over. So, you know, nobody's told me to shut up, but I don't have any special knowledge of anything. I'm just talking about things that I see. You make up your own mind.
Byrd then continued to unveil a picture that we had not imagined in this diary. He said that he traveled 1,700 miles on this journey, and he was so surprised when ice below gave way to lush green forests, lakes, rivers, and mountains. He saw animal life, and to his dismay realized he was looking at a large mammoth that resembled those now extinct. He noted that everything had unique and inexplicable color, and suddenly he realized in shock that there were some kind of space vehicles flying beside him. They escorted him, and he saw an entire city and was safely landed despite the fact he had no control over his plane. Once there, he was graciously greeted by civilians, and they called this place Agartha. Byrd's dismay upon arrival is clear. He and his crew were then taken to meet what they were told was the ruler of Agartha, the Master, whom he described as delicate and ancient. They were told they'd been allowed to enter, despite these invisible barriers, because of his high moral and ethical character. The ruler went on to say that ever since the U.S. had dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, their race had been very concerned for human safety and the survival of the planet. When they intervened, however, their craft had been attacked by our militaries, and Byrd was asked to share this message and warning to civilization. Their hosts then guided them to their plane and back to the outer world. In closing, Byrd said he briefed the Pentagon of his message from the Master, was interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team, and ordered to remain silent in regard to all that he learned on behalf of humanity. Incredible is all he could call it. He concluded, "I'm reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders." 10 years later, he wrote a final entry. "These last few years elapsed since 1947 have not been kind. I must state that I have faithfully kept this matter secret as directed all these years. It's been completely against my values of moral right. Now, I seem to sense the long night coming on, and this secret will not die with me. But as all truth shall, it will triumph, and so it shall. This can be the only hope for mankind. I've seen the truth, and it has quickened my spirit, and has set me free. I've done my duty towards the monstrous military-industrial complex. Now, the long night begins to approach, but there shall be no end. Just as the long night of the Arctic ends, the brilliant sunshine of truth shall come again, and those who are of darkness shall fall in its light. For I have seen that land beyond the pole, that center of the great unknown."
This guy was a Medal of Honor winner. I mean, this guy was a hero. Way, way, way above reproach. So, you know, you take it for what it's worth, but if the Earth is hollow, and I have every reason to believe it, because if you look at the space station experiments, which I'm showing you right now, you will see it too. All right, this is from NASA. I know, NASA, well, I'm telling you something. This is very good stuff. I love it. And this is Plasma Ben put this out. 2008, this goes back. Now, here's what's going to happen. They got a bubble of water out there, and he's going to do some experiments with it, spinning it, and see what it does in zero gravity. Here we go.
Here we have a rotating sphere of water about 25 millimeters in diameter, and inside this sphere are a whole bunch of little tiny air bubbles. And we will see what the angular acceleration due to rotation does to these air bubbles as a function of time. what you are observing are the bubbles moving to the center axis of rotation. As a function of time, they will form this rather tightly packed bubble core.
All right, I want to make a point. You see the depth that this bubble core is from the surface? That is critical to the hole going into, if the Earth would be hollow. You would end up with a vortex at the top, just like you look at a drain going into a toilet or something, down a drain. This is how it goes around a circle. That's what you would see at the end, and you would get a little tiny divot in the end due to the spin.
These bubbles are kept from coalescing from a small amount of added surfactant to the water. Here we have a rotating sphere filled with bubbles and tea leaves, and as expected, the bubbles go to the center and the tea leaves go to the outside edge, along with a few chunks of orange peel.
Terra firma. My point about the ends is that you're not going to have this big gigantic hole at the end. You're going to have a little tiny siphon going in there.
Here we have a rotating sphere with bubbles and chunks from breaking up a small vitamin tablet. And the bubbles go to the center core, but the vitamin chunks seem to stay in their location dispersed through the sphere. And from this we deduced that the vitamin chunks have a density near that of water.
Now, virtually every creature has a density near that of water, I believe. Okay, that's my story about possibility of the hollow earth. I have no idea. I haven't been there. I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. You look from the space station, the Earth is round. It may have been flat at one particular time. I have no clue. But if you tell me the Earth is flat now, I'm not going to go with that. I could possibly accept hollow. Thank you. God bless you, Roger.